Good morning. My name is Luis Falcon, and I am the Dean of the College of Fine Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences at UMass Lowell. It is my distinct pleasure to present to you our second honorary degree candidate, Jon Meacham. Jon, you're a presidential historian, contributing writer to the New York Times Book Review, contributing editor at Time Magazine, and Pulitzer Prize-winning author. You graduated from the University of the South in Swanee, Tennessee, with a degree summa cum laude in English literature. Your presidential biographies, many of which have become New York Times bestsellers, include Destiny and Power, The American Odyssey of George Herbert Walker Bush, Thomas Jefferson, The Art of Power, and Franklin and Winston, an intimate portrait of an epic friendship. In 2009, you won the Pulitzer Prize for a biography for your book, American Lion, Andrew Jackson in the White House. And your newest book, The Soul of America, The Battle for Our Better Angels, is currently #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list. A member of the Council on Foreign Relations and of the Society of American Historians, you are a distinguished visiting professor at Vanderbilt University and at the University of the South. As an executive editor at Random House, you published the letters of Arthur Schlesinger Jr. and books by, among others, Al Gore, John Danforth, Clara Bingham, Mary Soames, and Charles Peters. After serving as managing editor of Newsweek for 8 years, you were the editor of the magazine from 2006 to 2010. You are also a former editor of the Washington Monthly. The Anti-Defamation League awarded you its Hoover H. Humphrey First Amendment Prize, and in 2013, the Historical Society of Pennsylvania presented you with its Founders Award. Jon, for your significant and ongoing contributions, the University of Massachusetts Lowell is proud to confer upon you its highest honor, Doctor of Humane Letters, honoris causa.
By the authority vested in me by the Board of Trustees of the University of Massachusetts, I hereby confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Humane Letters, honoris causa, with all the rights and privileges thereunto pertaining. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming this morning's commencement speaker, Jon Meacham.
I can safely say this is the first award I've ever received in an athletic arena. This is a great sign of your sense of an ecumenical spirit here at UMass Lowell. I am both a Southerner and I'm not Irish. And so this was a diversity pick, and I appreciate it very much. Very warm words, Chancellor, thank you. Whenever I think and I hear nice things about me, I sometimes, I'm tempted to think, yes, that's exactly right. My mind goes back to a moment on the Washington Mall about a decade ago. And I was at the National Book Festival on my way to give my talk in those days about Andrew Jackson. And a woman ran up to me, which doesn't happen enough, or ever, actually. And she said, "Oh my God, it's you." And I said, "Well, yes, existentially speaking, that's hard to argue with, And she said, I love your books. They've meant a lot to me. They've meant a lot to my family. I just admire you so much. Will you wait right here while I go buy your book, and will you sign it?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And I stood there thinking everything was right with the world. Women are running up. They're admiring me. This is the way the world is supposed to be. Hand to God, she brought back John Grisham's latest novel. So whenever I think I have the world exactly where I want it, I remind myself that somewhere in America there's a woman with a forged copy of the Runaway Jury. Because what do? You have to sign it, right? So I was honored to speak not long ago at the funeral of Barbara Bush, one of your neighbors a little bit to the north. And I told that story, and there's an addendum to this story, which is also totally true. That was on a Saturday, and I was on my way to Kennebunkport to see the Bushes the next day. I was working on the book about the president. And I told this story to the Bushes. And Mrs. Bush looked across the table, and I was expecting some motherly reassurance, you know. She said, "How do you think poor John Grisham would feel? You know, he's a very handsome man." So I was 0 for 2. I'm thrilled to be here, honored to be here, and want to take a very brief time this morning. I know I'm the only thing standing between you and the rest of your lives. And so I'm well aware that this is a freight train coming down the road. But I am a historian. I try to take the disparate elements of the past, what William James called the blooming, buzzing confusion of reality, in order to make something new and resonant. And while history and tradition are not infallible, we don't have anywhere else to begin our deliberations about who we are and who we can become without reference to what we've been. And so my hope for our time is that we will reflect a little bit on the work you have been about and the work you're about to do. Consider this. If the men and women of the past, with all their flaws and limitations and appetites and ambitions, could press on through ignorance and superstition, racism and sexism, selfishness and greed, to form a more perfect union, then perhaps we can too. The world has turned over many times since you've been in it. So let's begin at the beginning. Most of the undergraduates who are receiving their degrees today were born about 1995-96, right? So Bill Clinton was in his first term as president when you were born. Donald Trump was starring in a Pizza Hut commercial. It was a good one, big, it was the best. It is Massachusetts, I figured that was safe. Gas cost $1.15 a gallon when you were born. The biggest movie of the year was Toy Story. There we go, some Pixar people, that's good. Get the development people on them. That competed against Braveheart, Casino, and 2 American classics, Grumpier Old Men and Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls. On television, ER, Seinfeld, and Friends dominated the culture. And the Dow Jones Industrial Average was just over 5,000. You were in your first years of formal education when terror struck us out of a brilliant blue sky on Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. You were beginning your secondary years when Barack Obama became the first African-American president in history. And you were here at UMass Lowell in 2016 when America elected the most unconventional president in the long life of the Republic. So you understand history. You've already lived through a chunk of it. The world you're entering is one of division and self-absorption. We stare at screens, some of you are right now, you admit it. We filter our news to suit our ideological predispositions. We tend to offer reflexive opinions without much thought and with ever-increasing fervor. If you remember one thing from this morning, just because you have the means to express an opinion quickly does not mean you have an opinion worth expressing quickly. So St. Augustine once defined, and you had St. Augustine thrown at you on a Saturday morning in a long time, admit it. St. Augustine once defined a nation as a multitude of rational beings united by the common objects of their love. It's a wonderful phrase. A multitude of rational beings united by the common objects of their love. So just over a decade and a half into the 21st century, what do we love in common? The painful but unavoidable answer is not enough. Yet I believe that history itself has the capacity to bring us together. For the American journey is ultimately the stories of obstacles overcome, crises resolved, freedom expanded. We have always grown in strength the wider we have opened our arms and the more we've opened our hearts. Here in Massachusetts, America began. Here in Massachusetts, your lives are beginning. And the story of the nation and your own stories are inextricably linked. For the republic that was born in this state remains, for all our manifold problems, the most durable and successful experiment in pluralism the world has ever known. Now, it's easy to be cynical about and even dismissive of that kind of view. But if natives and newcomers alike can live up to the American creed of expanding equality and of inclusion, then our best instincts can carry the day against our worst. Other national revolutions have descended into dictatorship and persecution. Ours has produced enviable, if fragile, democratic institutions and broad, if uneven, prosperity. So, what can we learn from the past as we engage the present? That the perfect should not be the enemy of the good, that compromise is the oxygen of a free government, and that we learn most from the past, not by looking up at people from our history adoringly or looking down on them condescendingly, but looking in the eye and taking their measure as human beings, not as gods, so that we can learn how they overcame the obstacles of their own time. And despite the partisan ferocity of the moment, if we listen closely, very closely, we can hear the music of Abraham Lincoln's better angels of our nature. Your task in all the years ahead is to keep an ear attuned to those notes. UMass Lowell has taught you how to hear that music, and always keep listening. The greatest obstacle to hearing those better angels at the moment is a rising sense of tribalism in America. Those motivated by what they see as extremism on the other side are likelier to view politics not as a mediation of difference, but as existential warfare in which no quarter can be given. The country works best, however, when we resist these tribal inclinations. For wisdom generally comes from a free exchange of ideas, and there can be no free exchange of ideas if everyone on your side already agrees with each other and thinks the other guys are beneath or beyond contempt. So, so here's my advice for you, and it is heartfelt and historically based, from my middle age to your youth. Please, 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 don't let any single cable network or Twitter feed tell you what to think. I promise you, if you do it for yourself, you'll like the results. A final word, be curious, be gracious, and be hopeful. Love your neighbor. Take naps outside on summer afternoons that are hopefully warmer than this one. Read Jane Austen and Anthony Trollope, please. Two English people, all right. By the way, the High Sheriff is going to the royal wedding later this afternoon. Read detective stories, go to the movies, subscribe to newspapers and magazines, vote in each and every election, In Tennessee, we do it early and often. I recommend that. Never be embarrassed to put your hand over your heart when the band strikes up the national anthem. Write thank you notes on real paper. And try to look up from those screens for a little while. Virtual reality is fascinating, but it's just that. It's virtual. And above all, in hours of joy and of darkness, please remember that a life well lived is judged not by the bottom line, but by the big picture. Godspeed to the River Hawks. Thank you.